Welcome everyone once again to our monthly The Doctors Are In, and we are here to serve you. Today we have the phenomenal Dr. Thomas Lewis with us, and of course we have you. You can learn a lot more about us when you go to the page for The Doctors Are In. You can see our bios and all that kind of good stuff. But tonight is not about us. It is about you. So we're just going to jump into it. Before we do that, I want to remind you that this is for educational purposes only. Anything that you hear in this show, please make sure that you consult with your healthcare provider before making any choices regarding your health. Remember, again, this is for educational purposes. We do not diagnose, treat, cure, or any of those types of things in the scope of this particular program. With that being said, let's get down to the fun stuff. So remember, also, this is brought to you by It Takes a Village Ministry, and we are in partnership. We are wonderfully blessed to be able to celebrate our partnership with natural health partners. And Dr. Lewis is here with us from that particular organization.
Thank you.
So, questions. The way this flows, for those of you who are new to us, we will accept any of your questions, and both of us will dive in and give our perspectives. If we don't know something, we are more than happy to tell you, guess what? Put a pin in it. We're going to do some research and we'll get back to you, because Dr. Lewis, don't we love doing research?
We love doing research, and that's, someone has to do it right. So we might as well be us, Michelle.
Exactly. That's what I love coming to these programs, because you guys keep on challenging us to sharpen our saws. We only get better if you continue to challenge us. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing with us, trusting us. And as we said, we're opening the floor, and we're going to take questions from those of you who are live with us today. And then we'll go into the vault and pull up some questions for people who were not able to make it live. Without any further ado, over to you guys. Anyone has any questions?
I could.
Yay, go ahead. Go for it.
Okay. So my daughter's had like all these symptoms for like 20 years. She's 35, and I got her a Dutch test, and it was totally like opposite of what I thought it would be. Like she's had debilitating cramps all her life, and one doctor said she had PCOS, and then another doctor said nope, she doesn't. And another doctor had an ultrasound tech do an ultrasound, and the ultrasound tech told her, well, you didn't fast, so I can't see one of your ovaries. And then when she went in back to see the doctor, the report said both ovaries are beautiful, there's nothing wrong with her. So and like from her symptoms, I would have thought she needed progesterone, but when we did the test, the Dutch test, her testosterone and estrogen were low, but not like the lowest normal range of the lowest, and the progesterone was high. So I'm thinking, well, maybe her body's doing what it needs to do or something, giving her the progesterone. But anyway, we tried to like raise the estrogen with seed cycling, and then she had worse cramps than she's ever had in her life. See, we did seed cycling and some different herbs. And so I'm like, I just don't know what to do anymore.
Let me ask you this: are her bowel movements normal? One good poop a day, and that kind of thing.
She has diarrhea a lot.
Yes.
I mean, or maybe not.
When your hormones seem to be out of balance, it's usually because you're not manufacturing them well, not because your body's not signaling to have them manufactured. And the gut the gut does that, but when you're in dysbiosis, everything kind of goes amok because your absorption profiles go completely, down, not in a good way. And so the diarrhea is most likely SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overload. And how that happens is, we're all in the air. There are all kinds of things, dust particles, organisms, parasites, bacteria, virus, and they light on our saliva. We swallow that, and the barrier that gets rid of them is strong acid. But when you have weak acid, then some of these organisms can survive. I tell people to do a very simple experiment. They never do it, and I don't want them to, but I want them to do it, from a Gedenken, German for thinking. So you take a glass of water, you take a glass of vinegar, and you go to the hardware store and get a glass of muriatic acid, which is hydrochloric acid, very similar to your gut, and put a living fly in each one. Come back in 10 minutes. And in the water, it's either gone because it flew away or it's just swimming around. And the vinegar is probably doing okay too. But in the acid, you may not even see the fly there anymore. It's been digested. Okay, that's so the fly is just a corollary to a little teeny organism you can't see. So the number one thing that goes downstream is what's called an archaebacteria. There's a number of things that contaminate the intestine and colon, but archaebacteria take hydrogen that's downstream and convert it into methane. Okay, so that can be the pain from the production of methane from SIBO, and then you get this dysbiosis and how the stool tries to form because everything's messed up, and that's where you get the diarrhea. So, one of the things we do is betaine hydrochloride, digestive enzymes, bile salts, probiotics. But there's a supplement called Atrantil. I can put it, I'll just spell it out or put a link to it in the chat. Atrantil. And what it has 3 ingredients. One that sops up the hydrogen, one that kills the archaebacteria, and one that does another important thing. Maybe suck up some of the methane. I'm not quite sure, but it's called Atrantil, Atrantil. And they have Atrantil and Atrantil Pro, and the only difference is the Pro comes with some digestive enzymes. But see, that may or may not be the ultimate solution. I think the ultimate solution is getting the microbiome. So treating the SIBO and the bloating is good. But it's downstream from what's causing it. So you really got to work on the front end with I was just on a Jonathan Otto presentation today, and I was actually very impressed with one of their products that kind of, I look at the gut as soil, okay? And when we put a probiotic in it, it's like putting a seed in. And if you do gardening and you plant a seed, you don't buy things already germinated and you plant seeds, you nurture those like a baby. The water, the potting soil, the sunlight, all that good stuff. We have to, in your daughter's case, we have to do the same with any probiotic, fermented food, whatever that's bringing organisms in there, because the gut's so out of balance that you put something in and it's like you and me going to the top of Everest. It's not the right environment. Okay, so that's why we do the bile salts, the acid, the digestive enzymes, some butyrate, the things that are normal to the gut when the gut is normal. And I learned this actually from people who do fecal transplant research, and they say the difference between a fecal transplant and a probiotic is that the fecal transplant comes with the entire ecosystem. So we need to, when we take a probiotic, we need to, if we need one because of a problem, then we need to bring the ecosystem with it. I think it's pretty logical that if your gut's a mess and you've lost some of your microbiome, and then we add a probiotic and we expect it to flourish, this is biblical about the mustard seed, right, Dr. Gamble? It's like if the mustard seed falls on fertile soil, it grows into a big tree. But if it falls in the briar or on hard land, it dies. It doesn't foster a new mustard tree. So that's kind of the way I look at it. And if you wanted to, looks like Dr. Gamble knows you. If you want to send an email to her, I'll send you an image of the probiotic schedule and the supplement I use to foster creating you know, an enhanced microbiome. And then the Atrantil, you know, we have stuff downstream, okay? So we have to deal with that because that can stay there, you know, so we have to get rid of that too. But in the future, you won't have that stuff coming downstream.
And
That's phase one, okay? And
Yeah.
hopefully phase one and two, hopefully that works. You know, but we have to have other tricks up our sleeve. Like she could have H. pylori, which is going to keep the front end of the gut, you know, in a dysbiotic state. So all the things you do are, you know, like swimming against the tide and things like that. But this is a good, easiest, simplest, least costly first step.
Thank you.
And the other thing to consider, Karen, is looking at what created the imbalance in the digestive system in the first place. So I would be curious as to the type of personality that your daughter is. Is she someone who is more on the anxious spectrum?
Very.
Yeah.
She's yeah, like her adrenals are probably shot. But yeah, so she's high functioning autistic, used to be Asperger's, but she has a career, she's supporting herself, she has a couple of acres and some chickens and dogs and a cat and takes care of all that, and the
Are you
patients.
talking about my daughter or your daughter?
Really?
Because Dr. Gamble pointed out, and I wrote to my daughter who has a very similar problem to your daughter, even though we've been working on it. And I came up with a list of things that's probably causing it. And Dr. Gamble said the number one thing is going to be stress. And my daughter's completely stressed. It's like, I went to visit her, you know, drove 15 hours and I can't go to the house because they're like, oh, things aren't quite. So I don't go to the house. We go out and do things. But
Yeah. Yes,
and
that's
she
what
has chickens. She has a couple acres. Sounds like you're.
my daughter won't let us come over. She won't clean. She says she has to clean the house. Yeah, but
We're
she.
sisters.
There are
Yeah.
things that, because I teach yoga and I'm always trying to get her to breathe, belly breathe and all. And one time, I mean, she's always telling me why that's not going to work for her and she can't not stress and this, that, and the other. And one time she was in so much pain and I just made her try it. She was in the car and I was on the phone with her and I had to count, you know, inhale and count and exhale. And
I have a similar one, and I sent her a link to Dr. Gamble's website. And I told her if she'll go through the whole program, I will pay for it. It's worth it to have an improvement in that relationship. Because I'm going to spend 2 weeks in Europe with her, and it's like, ah! Do I want to go 2 weeks in Europe with her or just stick my fingers into an outlet? I haven't figured out which one yet.
So
but making her breathe, that worked for it. Stopped, like she was hyperventilating with the pain and it stopped. And then then she's called me another time to have me count for her. And I sent her I made a audio tape so she can play it whenever she wants to.
So what I'll do, Karen, is I'll also share with you a resource for a breathing program. Because the other thing that we look at with regards to SIBO, especially if it is SIBO, is looking at the vagus nerve. A lot of times people have issues with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth because the tonality of the vagus nerve is so depleted. And if that is the case, it doesn't make a difference how many supplements you take, how many probiotics you take. If you do not tonify the vagus nerve, then it kind of goes out the window. And there are a lot of things that can be done to, you know, bring tone back to the vagus nerve, including breathing, gargling, humming, even massaging, you know, the ileocecal valve, you know, to make sure that it is shut. Number one, so that you don't have the backup of the bacteria from the from the large intestine into the small intestine. So that is one thing to consider. And then the other thing I was going to ask you is Does she have issues also with her menstrual cycle?
Just the pain. Well, I mean, it's heavy and just a lot of pain.
Yeah. So, you know, looking at that, to also look at things like magnesium may be part of the issue, especially if she's one of those high stress individuals where she's utilizing a lot of her magnesium just to buffer what's happening with her sympathetic nervous system. So if she's depleted in magnesium, or if the magnesium is not able to be readily available to the tissues, then that also will contribute to the cramping sensation that she's having. And of course, as everything that Dr. Lewis said in terms of looking at really drilling down into the entire digestive system, starting from the mouth, you know, is she chewing? Is she like stressing out? You know, if she is what you're saying, she's probably eating while she's doing 50 million things. So her body is in sympathetic, it's in high stress when she's eating, and therefore it's compromising everything that is done. And so there are just a lot of different entryways in terms of helping to support the shift into the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest, that is going to help to further fortify the protocol that Dr. Lewis has shared with you.
So
You
she
know,
takes 400 milligrams. You think she should take more magnesium? Because maybe she's using more.
there's never a bad thing in taking a little extra magnesium. And I also put a note in there about the lack of potassium.
Mm-hmm.
This is as big a plague as the lack of magnesium, iodine, and a whole bunch of things. See, doctors are afraid of potassium because it's used for lethal injection. But the most profound thing in our physiology and what we spend 1/3 of our energy doing is pushing stuff into and out of cells. It's called active transport. And what drives that? If you can't get stuff in, it's like your house, okay? We go out and shop and we get stuff to sustain ourselves at home, and then we got to get rid of the trash because we don't, it's going to back up and the place is going to look like mine. Okay, you don't want that. But so what I do is I make up a salt, and I'll give you the link. So I didn't finish the story. Active transport is what drives everything in the cells, and it's driven by sodium and potassium. Sodium opens up channels to bring nutrients in, and potassium opens up channels to send things out. So, you know, sodium is the shopper and potassium is the garbage guy. Okay, and that's a 3-to-2 ratio. So what I do is I make up a salt mixture roughly 3-to-2. I actually go a little more conservative. I'll take a quarter cup, you know, measuring thing, and I'll put 2 scoops of my sea salt in there, and I'll put 1 scoop of the potassium. And I use that for everything. And the reason why I do that ratio is the potassium is a little more acrid tasting than the sodium chloride, but it's fine. And you know, and that ixnay to the ampcray, if you know pig Latin, no more cramps, things like that. So I'm going to send a link to a company that I get my potassium salt from called Piping Rock, and it's really cheap. And you can get your sea salt there. And then I'll put a link in from Piping Rock where they have this ancient seabed magnesium chloride also. And what I do is I put the old Levi's, when people were getting fatter, Levi's jeans ad said it has a skosh more room in the seat and you know, waist, you know. So I put a skosh of magnesium in my mixture too. And that's on everything, you know, my salad, my soup, my meat, my vegetables, my stir fry, that's my salt. So I'm never getting out of balance of potassium unless I go fast food.
Yeah. And what I do also with that, Dr. Lewis, is I put in the sea vegetables. I get my sea vegetables into a powder. So like my kelp, my nori, my dulse, and I mix all of that. And that, like you said, becomes like my little shaker seasoning that I put on all of my food. I put it on my salad, you know, all of those types of things, so that you're getting those key minerals, in particular, like you said, the magnesium, the potassium, but, you know, even your iodine, all of those things will be, you know, linked up into that beautiful, you know. Dr. Ali, welcome, welcome. Yay. We had a question about a young lady who has been struggling with menstrual issues for over 20 years. She's what, in her 20s, Karen?
35.
35. So, it's been a major issue. They did a Dutch test. It was contrary to what she thought it was going to be. So the Dutch test showed that her estrogen was low, progesterone was low. No, testosterone was low, right? And
Yeah.
with that, was the cortisol high?
Cortisol, I think it was not, I think it looked like her adrenals were shot. I can look for the test on my computer and then tell you in a few minutes.
That would just give further confirmation of what Dr. Lewis and I were saying in terms of her adrenal status and how that a lot of times feeds into, the extra need for magnesium, potassium, and things of that nature, and can result in that cramping, and those types of things. But anyway, so Dr. Ali, any tips, any thoughts, questions for her?
Well, there are many homeopathic remedies that help with menstrual disorders and cramps and stuff like that. But she should go to a homeopathic to see the best remedy for her, according to her specific symptoms, to her mood swings, and so on. So yes, there is an option on homeopathy for her.
So she also said that the young lady tends to be very anxious and, doing 50 million different things. So that kind of gives us a perspective of her mood profile, I guess.
Yes, but remember, homeopathy has to be like very specific for every person. We cannot say, oh, everyone with a cramp or with a menstrual disorder should take, I don't know, pulsatilla. No, maybe some women need pulsatilla, some women need sepia, some women need whatever. So I would suggest for her to go to a homeopath to receive a specific remedy for her needs.
Okay, awesome. All righty.
I'm gonna look that up and
You were saying, Karen?
One of the
I'm gonna look for her Dutch test and I'll come back in.
one of the comments was on restoring the doctor-patient relationship. And as long as we have corrupt payers that force the doctors into very short visits and leave, are only reactive or turnstile to specialists, which are very expensive, and they just get whipped around. And you look at the labs and they say they're normal, and the person feels like crap, and then they tell you that it's all in your head. I mean, this group that we have, two generations. See, in 1980, the FDA allowed pharmaceutical industry to participate in medical school education. And one of the stories I tell, which I wrote in one of my books, was when I was examining what was going on in the schools. And all my mentors were from Harvard, but they were renegades. But back in around 2000, a student at Harvard was part of the American Student Medical Association. And he was listening to a lecture by a Harvard professor and saying, that doesn't sound right. And then they formed this whole subcommittee. And what they did is they went around or interviewed medical students from all the medical schools around the country, and gave them all a grade based on the professor and how many outside industrial associations the professor had. And Harvard overall in their first grading system scored a good, beautiful red F. Okay. And so as long as this is where our doctors are coming from, and the so-called top ones, the influential ones, which, during COVID were paid the most to maintain the narrative, that ain't ever going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just so when you talk about changing the doctor-patient relationship, it's going to be a couple generations once we start changing the medical education system, the payer system, and the government and industry relationship. So we're trying to deal with the second and first largest industries in the world. Number 2, healthcare. Number 3, the U.S. government.
And where we
But Michelle, we're not gonna die trying, aren't we?
Well, you know, the other part of the spectrum where we come in with It Takes a Village is educating you guys, meaning ordinary people. Because what we're doing and you'll notice what Dr. Lewis and I and Dr. Ali and I are doing is troubleshooting, saying, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? We're not diagnosing, we're not treating, we're not saying that this specifically is going to cure whatever. We're saying, maybe you should consider SIBO. Maybe you should consider magnesium. You know, maybe you should consider looking at the sympathetic, parasympathetic system. Maybe you should consider looking further up the digestive system in terms of, you know, what's going on in the stomach, maybe even what she's chewing. You know, we're trying to get you to start to think about things from the perspective of whatever symptomology you're experiencing is your body talking to you. Now, the question just becomes, what is it saying? What is it saying? You know, not shut it up, take some pills so that you could get rid of the symptom. No, we want it to talk louder until we can understand what it's saying, right? And that's the beauty of the conversation that we're having here, this back and forth. And I encourage you to have that back and forth conversation with whomever you have as your healthcare provider. You know, don't just take a blanket, quote unquote, prescription and walk out the door. Have that conversation, because that is where you learn, and that is where you become the captain of your ship in charge of your health journey. All righty. Any other questions? What's another question that we've got?
Wait, I want to add something to what you were just saying.
Oh.
We have all the knowledge within ourselves. So if we take that power, like Michelle just said, you can know what's going on in your body. So instead of suppressing any symptom with whichever treatment it is, ask yourself, what is this symptom trying to tell me? Because the body is talking to us through symptoms. It's the only way it knows how to talk with us. So we need to stop and think, what is this symptom talking about? Is it because something I did? Is it because something I ate? Is it something because I'm very anxious, or I'm giving second thoughts on any topic you want? So stop before taking any medicine and try to figure out, because we always have the answers, but we want like the fast track. Oh, I want this pill, or I want this treatment so I can feel better now. Of course, you're going to feel better in the moment that you recognize what caused that symptom. So we always have the answer within us. So it's very important for us like to go inside and think about it.
You know, I was listening to it. I agree with you 100%. And I'll just add one piece to that. I was listening to this neuro-ophthalmologist in a lecture with someone who really understands brain, you know, brain training and whatnot. But you listen to it, but the other suggestion is you talk back to it forcefully. You drive the narrative for your body, not vice versa. And so that's the power of the mind, to saying like, I am going to take control of this situation, and you're not gonna take me down anymore. And the simple translation of that is a positive attitude versus a negative attitude, you know, and we know how profound that is in health. But I think it can be, rather than a passive thing, you can try to make it a more active thing. And I bet you Dr. Gamble does that a lot with her folks.
Well, I don't know, Dr. Lewis.
What's that?
I think I take a different approach, meaning
Oh, okay.
the approach that I take is that your body always knows best. Always knows best. And I believe that in our Western health paradigm, we have this notion that we're going to control it, and we're going to show it who's boss, and all of those types of things. Whereas from when you look at how other people approach health and healing in other cultures, it is much more of a symbiotic relationship and much more of a relationship of honor, where we are honoring the pathway that is dictated by nature. And when something
Yeah.
goes awry in the body, we ask ourselves, how is it that we are not in alignment with nature, as opposed to how
Yeah.
do we make nature conform to what we want and what we feel that we need at this point in time?
No, I don't want nature to conform. I want our body. But so I think we're saying the same thing, but a little differently. But I just used the example when I was a kid, and there was a reference to this recently, that there was a national story where this kid was working on a teenager was working on his car, and the jack tipped over and fell on the kid, and the mom came over and literally lifted the car
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
That's what I'm referring to, kind of as that if you have that kind of resolve,
Yeah.
you're not really controlling it. You're leveraging what you have rather than letting things that could be helping you be quiescent. I guess that's the difference.
Well, I agree 100%. And I think that that is something that we don't hear more of. We don't hear more of a healthcare system that empowers the individual to feel, yes, you've got this. You can heal. You can transform your health. You know, we're told that we're victims, and they've got to come and fix us and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely resonate with what you're saying. Absolutely.
Well, I just want to let you know that I don't think I have any skills in this area. And I'll tell you, I'll give you the vivid proof of this, because I have this program that has like 20 different offerings, and they're all my creation, over the last 30 years. But when I met Dr. Gamble, I realized, oh, I have a huge void. So I put Dr. Gamble's program on my website. Okay. So just, regardless of our little banter, I recognize that I do not have any of those skills that you have in this very powerful area.
But you see, Dr. Lewis, I think this is a really great example of what healthcare should be. It should be about us having conversations, not be afraid of not being exactly what the other person is, because we all need something different, and sometimes we need different things at different times. And different conversations will spark something in you, because as Dr. Ali says, you have that wisdom within. And sometimes you just need to hear it, and then it clicks inside of you like, aha, yes, that's it. And you wouldn't get that if we didn't have this back and forth and have this beautiful conversation. So I am very grateful for
And
it.
then we wouldn't get a beautiful testimony from Carla about how it happened in her own life. There's nothing like, the testimony of how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You
So
can do it. We were discussing about the whole article about breastfeeding and how, it's now become sort of what's the right word? A fringe activity, and rather than a natural thing. And it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling, But
So
right.
another question. Yay, Carla has a question.
Let me grab my book.
Okay. Uh-oh, she's got a book.
Thank you.
It's gonna be a heavy question. Lord have mercy. We better get pencil and pen, you guys. Take notes of this one. Uh-oh.
No. Actually, this is okay though. This is mom's information, all my notes here.
Okay. Go for it.
Wow. You're organized.
I try to be. Hi, docs. Thank you for this moment. It's so good to have like-minded doctors to talk to. So, as you see, I put in the chat, I was 38 years old when I had my son, and I tried my best to have a healthy diet. However, when he was his first 2 years of life, he didn't talk until he was 3. I had him evaluated, and all they told me that it was he needed to socialize. And let's fast forward this past summer, I found out that he was on the spectrum. It was like they said it's mild. Um, but they say it doesn't matter. You know, he's autistic. So the thing is, the psychologist that I used, I mean, he seemed okay, but I just wanted to make sure. Then I also took him to see a neurologist. So from her evaluation, she said that he had learning, focusing issues, OCD, anxiety, while being on the spectrum. So, um, because I'm a homeschool mom, it makes it difficult to kind of make sure that he's okay. Now, they advised me to make sure he gets individual therapy, but I decided to start him. He's not very, you know, once he gets to know you, he likes to have a conversation.
Is he now?
He's just turned 12. Yeah, so he's great with he likes art and he gets consumed in art and music. He's okay with math. It's just that sometimes when it comes to him doing his work, he has to kind of relax by doodling. And it's a lot of repetition that I have to give him to get him to do the math. But he'll do it, but he has to doodle first. And sometimes I have to give him clear directions. Like if I have practice sheets, I will say, okay, focus on just working right here. But even though I tell him to work right there, he wants to do his own thing. But he comes back. So my thing is, I'm just hoping if, like a lot of people were telling me, I try to do it alone. And thankfully, Dr. Michelle said it's okay to have a village, right? So I'm just wondering if, like, they told me people in my network were telling me it's good to like try to get like SSI for him, but to make sure that the evaluations were, like credible, like they were good. So I didn't know if you all know about any doctors. I'm in New York. If there are any like psychologists or neurologists, should I do any more testing? And
How does he score compared to his peers, first grade, second grade, third grade?
well, when she did the test, like
No,
he
I'm talking about not this. I'm talking about like, just reading and basic stuff in his. Oh, you're doing homeschooling,
I'm
but
doing
but
homeschooling. Yeah.
even still, you must be doing some standardized testing and be able to compare him against peer group. I just wondered how he's doing.
Well, I haven't even gotten a chance to do the testing, the standardized testing yet. But the last time I did, when he was in his school, he was on point, right?
See,
But
I'll tell you a story.
yeah.
Because sometimes we diagnose because there's money behind it. So I know the story of probably the most intellectually sharp person I've ever met.
Mm-hmm.
And the story behind him is he didn't become verbal until he was 5 years old. They all thought he was retarded. Okay. And then this guy, 2 years younger than me, but I knew him way back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
went to Harvard Law School and Sloan MIT Business School at the same time.
Wow.
And he didn't even attend constitutional law, but he got the highest grade. This kid didn't speak until he was 5 years old.
Wow.
So are
Yeah.
we overdiagnosing these kids too?
I know. Right.
I just don't know. So like when there should be standard tests that we can run to see, but he would have failed the verbal component, obviously. And
Right.
what track would they have put him on, and what drugs would they have put him on?
Exactly.
This is really
And
I mean, I know all about the
Yeah,
autism and the
Dr. Lewis.
vaccinations and
And
things like that,
that's
and
why I wanted your expertise because even when I went to the psychologist, he already saw the gift. He had the gift of music, the gift of art. And like I said, he does the work, but it's just that his focus, he's like, okay, I have to do
you
this. Let
know,
me prepare myself.
Dr. Michelle, are you familiar with the Gartner scale of intelligence?
yes, and I'm coming to it from a perspective of an educator, because I was a classroom teacher for over 20 years.
Nice.
And I'm going to agree with Dr. Lewis that there is a lot of money in this business. So when we talk about our children and we talk about them being on the spectrum, I like to put a lot of brakes on that, because number one, what does that even mean? A couple of years ago, if we go back 100 years, a lot of the children that we would now call autistic were some of our geniuses,
My example would be Steve Jobs. I mean, what if they put him on the spectrum? Because he was, a little bit different. I read his story, he was adopted, it was a Hungarian father and something like that. And he was not a normal child. So we're going to squelch Apple.
Yeah.
Right.
So one of the things to consider, there are a couple of things to consider. Number one, you can get standardized tests done by yourself. You can go to Bob Jones, and you can also go to things like Abeka, Alpha Omega. Oh gosh, the one that I'm thinking about, because when I was a homeschooling parent and I did a homeschool co-op, I would actually do the testing for all of the people in the co-op, and we used, I'm trying to remember the standardized test that we use. When it comes to me, I'll send you some information on that. But yeah,
Thank you, Dr.
do your
Michelle.
own standardized testing. So that's one thing. And yet still take that with a grain of salt, because different children develop in different ways and have different gifts. And I guess the question to ask yourself is, what is your child's gift? And what does he need to be able to bring that gift out to its full potentiality? Does he need calculus? No. Does he need algebra 2? No. I mean, and I'm saying this as a classroom teacher, and I taught mathematics. I taught high school mathematics. And I have to tell you, the majority of the stuff that I taught was completely irrelevant for 90% of the students. It was. All it did was make people feel like crap, because it was like, you don't know how to do this stuff. And, like, really?
I'll have to tell you a story, okay? But I put the link to Gartner's difference intelligences, and we only measure
Thank you, Dr. Lewis.
We only measure at most 2 of them. Okay. So I was harassed by a board member of when I was up in New Hampshire, Keene State College, to do a chemistry class for non-chemistry majors. So my first day in there, this is how I approached it. I said, look, I know you guys aren't science major or chemistry for non-science majors. I said, I know this is going to be a challenge for you. And I want to explain that I don't want you to feel down on yourself, because there are 7 different intelligences at least. And you need, we measure in chemistry and the sciences really 2 core ones you need to be there, but you could be superior in intellect like Steve Jobs in some of these other intelligences. So I don't want you to feel down on yourself. But then I had to end this way, but if you don't do well in the course, I am going to fail you. And that's how that was day 1. I got off on the right foot.
Another resource that you can look at is the Amen Clinic. If you go to Dr. Amen's site, he has an assessment for brain types.
Oh, nice.
And identify your child's brain type, and from there, you can identify what may be certain nutritional supports that you can put in. So there's certain people who have a brain type that requires more fish oils. Other people requires more magnesium. Other people have brain types that require different things to help to sharpen the focus. So that is like a preliminary kind of thing that you can look at. You can also look at information from the Walsh Institute. And
the Walsh Institute.
These things are the areas that I specialize in. I love talking about these things. But with the Walsh Institute, they're talking about having a neuro approach that is based on biochemistry. So this is a book by Dr. Walsh, which is called Nutrient Power.
Okay.
And with Nutrient Power, able to look at certain preliminary blood tests that you can use to determine, your child's, say, methylation type. If it's an over-methylator, under-methylator, if a child has high levels of his
Okay.
pyrroles, different things that influence how they learn and influence their behavior. So,
Right.
depending on what you're observing with your child, if he's more anxious or if he's having difficulty focusing, if, all of these things reflect what's going on in the brain, the actual brain, So instead of medicating the brain, which is what your
Right.
psychiatrists and psychologists are going to suggest, to ask yourself again, like Dr. Ali said,
Which I won't want.
what does your brain want?
Right.
And maybe it doesn't want or need anything. It just wants to be free to be who he
Exactly.
I think Carla, you and Dr. Ali answered the question. There's no one size that fits all.
Exactly.
Oh, and see, in society today, the
Yeah.
debate, and I listened to Dr. Thomas Sowell, I think is the greatest thinker of our generation, who's a economist, but also a social analyst. And what he says is we've morphed from equal opportunity to equal outcome. And
Mhm.
when the goal of society is equal outcome, that means we're all the same. We might as well
Right.
be,
Robots.
mannequins,
Right.
and equal opportunity means whether you have, any of those different intelligences, there's an opportunity if you flourish and do well in that area, then there's no barrier other than your own hard work and hopefully finding your special gift and apply the work and the gift to the endpoint. But otherwise we want conformity. That's why these mood meds, you know what these mood meds do?
Hmm.
Calm everybody down to the exact same state. There's
Yeah.
no disruption in the classroom. There's no problem with someone in a nursing home with a complaint. I adopted a child and he was really brilliant, but they had him on so many drugs. When I got him, he had on 2 or 3 drugs, and I immediately took him off. I didn't even care
No.
consequences because I wanted to know who he was.
Right.
They're all on it.
Interesting.
My
Yep.
daughter ran intake for an arts college, Montserrat up in Massachusetts, and these are a little more out there kids, right? They're
Mhm.
75% of them were on dumbing down meds. 75% of the applicants.
Wow, that's a lot.
I mean,
but
like,
that's
how are you going to get anything creative?
Wow, exactly. Wow.
And we have to go back to remind ourselves of why this educational system was created in the first place. It wasn't
Exactly.
created to create geniuses. It was created to make better workers
Exactly, Dr.
in the
Michelle.
factory that just follow directions and are like this.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that is what's happening. That's unfortunately the perspective that's being inculcated in our schools, because as a classroom teacher, again, you have maybe 25, 30 students in a classroom, and they are very, very different, different levels,
Mm-hmm.
different abilities, different gifts, and
Exactly.
you are expected to teach all of those people the same lesson. And you're expected to
Right.
get the same outcomes from all of those children. So you
Right.
do what Dr. Lewis is saying. You give them the mood medications so that they all look and sound the same. Sit down, Johnny,
Yes.
put your head down, listen to what I say.
One thing I don't know is, like, when you have a child that you think is on the spectrum, and then there's a so-called treatment. What is the goal of treatment? What are they actually mechanistically trying to treat? And is it really a disease, or what is it? It makes no sense. And they don't know what any of those drugs do mechanistically.
Exactly.
Know what they do.
Right. Because
It's
some of
like,
these things
I
are
don't get it.
new. Right. They just came out. You have
Take
no
them out in
what.
the woods and go hiking with the kids, plant trees and get out in the soil and like participate in diversity and find out what, this may spur more geniuses because they have maybe if there's something going on, and I'm not saying there is, that it elicits a special skill that will help us evolve into an even more superior, you know,
So,
Right.
the one thing I will say is to definitely ask yourself what Dr. Lewis has said, which is,
Right.
actually, I'm going to ask you the question. What are you looking for?
Mhm.
I'm curious as to
Right.
how you got this assessment in the first place. Why did you take your child there in the first place?
Wait.
What were the questions that you had? What were the things that you were observing that made you go, I don't know, and to really ask yourself, why is this a problem? Is it a problem? I
Yeah.
don't know. And
Yeah.
Is it a problem or an inconvenience? And I think a
yeah,
lot of things is it's an inconvenience to have the kid acting outside the norm, and therefore we label it.
and
Right.
to remember, the norm is really just what is repeated the most. It's not what is necessarily healthy. We have to make that distinction.
Mm-hmm.
That the norm today in classrooms is for children to sit at class periods of 50 minutes in a seat
Right.
looking at one person doing a lecture or whatever. That's the quote unquote norm. Is that healthy?
No, not at all. Because when I
But
was
that's the
teaching
goal.
Dr. Michelle, right? Because even Dr. Michelle, I had a child. Because at my son's school, I was a teacher there. The reason why we left was because, in 2019, my son was on a religious exemption and they kicked him out, and I followed,
Mm,
right? So when I was there was a child, I forgot what it was, but um neurological, it was neurological damage or something. But the thing is that I never made this child feel like he was any different than those other children. So I always made sure, especially I had a lot of boys, so I never sat in my seat, so they didn't sit in their seat. And a lot of time we just created this community, right?
mhm,
Where they had a voice. I try to make sure that they, their self-esteem, things like that. And this one particular child, he had, when it came to testing, he would freeze up.
mm,
So I kind of followed his lead, and we did have to do a test, and it was about him with the eye and connection. I had to do sound. I had to kind of modify the classroom. But anyway, to make a long story short, I just let him know, listen, when you're ready, we had to do like one-on-one testing for a little bit. I didn't know whether it was a good fit, but it seemed like it helped him boost his self-esteem and him, we had family projects, so his presentation. But to answer your question about why I took my son there was because I was going through issues with his father. We were trying to have that relationship, and I think a lot of our relationship stressed him a lot. So he started to have a lot of nosebleeds, and this was something I was going to
Wow.
bring up to the both of you. So to all of you. So he was 5 years old, and he started having nosebleeds, and they were unpredictable. I did the whole cauterized thing. I would never do that again. That was the most horrible experience, just to see him in that moment. At 6 years old, he tried to be calm. I was more like, what is this? And the doctors keep pushing that. So what ended up happening is, unfortunately, this summer, I had to finally say, you know what, I can't do this with his father anymore. I had to kind of say, listen, I'm mom. I have to take charge. I have to make a difference. I need to give him a better environment. And because I realized that the environment was affecting his behavior. So I believe that could have been another thing that is offsetting all what we're talking about. So, and then his diet wasn't really good. So I ended up going, and he was they told me he was anemic. So I started adding a lot more greens in his diet, changing his diet, and now the bleeding stopped.
mm,
Yeah, but then the thing is, when he found out this information, unfortunately, because he was there, it seemed like it caused him to feel like he had to fit that behavior. You get what I'm saying, right? I
mm,
feel like it caused him to kind of regress.
mm,
So I try to tell him, I said, this is who you were before. They're saying this, but that doesn't define you, right? And I try not to focus on that. And yeah, so I just went looking for answers,
mhm,
because you know what it was too. Also, people were telling me that, oh, Carla, I'm looking at him and he seemed like it's something going on. This was family that was telling me. But see, they didn't understand everything that was going on, the relationship between his father and me, the home environment. I believe that's what the trigger was. Like he probably was suppressing his voice that created
Mhm. So what I'm going to jump in and
this.
say
Yeah.
is to remember what Dr. Ali, Dr. Lewis, and Dr. I.
Dr. I love it. That might be your new name. Dr. I.
So remember what all of
Yeah,
us are saying in this call.
and
You
I love it.
are
That's why I said I had to
wiser.
make this call.
You are wiser beyond your recognition.
Yes, I know my child. Yeah.
Know your child. As I'm
Yeah.
listening to you and I'm listening to how you were troubleshooting and you were doing different things, I'm like, why did she even ask the question? She already answered her own question. You were like,
No,
yeah,
but it was good.
having a nosebleed and, it was related to blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay. And she was like, yeah. And then, I started getting more greens and, we can tell you all the fancy stuff behind it. Like, yeah, well, in the greens,
No,
you
your
have
stuff is
vitamin
good.
K, vitamin spotting and blah, 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 yak, yak, yak. But at
Ah,
the day, who the heck cares? The only thing that's important is that you can follow your intuition. God
yeah,
has
exactly.
that connection with your son and never allow the medical hexing to dictate who you are or who your son is.
Right. Yeah,
And
Dr. Michelle, because
believe
I was
believe
not
me,
going to put him on medication. Absolutely not. Because you
believe
see that oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Lewis, what are you saying?
no, I interrupted. I shouldn't have, but I'm just saying
No, you're good.
you don't want to put him in medication, but believe me, your
No.
goal is not for this child to go to Stanford, Harvard, or MIT. That is not your goal for that child. You love that child too much and have more for that child than to put him
Traumatized
through
with that.
and to torture him through that kind of.
Listen, I had to it was a journey to have him, but you see what I told you, right? I actually had an ectopic pregnancy miscarriage than him. So it was 3 pregnancies in that birth. And just like Dr. Ali said, I had to stop and think like, okay, I was able to get pregnant, right? And then so I just changed my whole mindset.
Mhm.
And I decided because of my story, once COVID happened, I created, a little blog to let mothers know, listen, change your mindset. Just because you might not be able to have a baby, it's because maybe this is what's happening, right? And I did the whole same thing. I said, you need to find out what's wrong with you. And that's what I found was wrong with me. And then I remember they were trying, I did my research. The only thing I didn't research was the Hep B shot, but that's another story. So, um, and what I did was when I did my research, I found out all these things about eating well and so on and so forth. Another thing I found out was when, because I had a miscarriage, they were trying to tell me to have the amniocentesis because I was 38 years old. I said absolutely not, and then they wanted to give me a C-section because the fibro was blocking my cervix. So that's why I went on the computer. I said, oh no, no C-section for me. So that's, yeah.
So I want to end on that for this month. That you got this, girl. You got
Thank you, Dr. Michelle. Listen, but I loved you. I still wanted to hear what you are. I might have been missing something.
well. What we said to you was, Dr. Lewis emphasized
Excuse.
a perspective of really highlighting the gifts of your child instead of looking to see, oh, what's wrong with my child. Understand that your child has certain gifts
Mm-hmm.
and what is it that you're really looking for? What would you be taking medications to do? What is the outcome that you're
Right.
seeking? And is that
But
outcome
you know what, Dr.
needed?
Michelle? Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Right. Thank you. Because, I'm sorry to interrupt. Because, that's one thing I liked about the psychologist. He wasn't even, because he said your son has gifts. He looked at, because he played his recorder when he was there and his art, his art. He was like, wow, your son, you need to focus on this.
Mhm.
And I'm glad he didn't mention any medication. The neurologist, I think she did put, of course, had that on the side, but she did tell me to focus on like individual counseling for him. But what I decided to do was you know, he really doesn't have like a strong male, you
Mm.
know, figure around. So my brother's there, but we, you know, because of distance, sometimes it's hard, but he's there. But what I decided to do was without school, because that's where he takes his art at times. Mr. Chad focusing on, you know, positive affirmations and getting him out of his comfort zone. So he seems to like that right now. Just did that like
Consider
for
doing
like a couple
something
of
like a
weeks.
martial
So
arts class.
he did that when he was 5.
Mm-hmm.
But then he stopped. What happened is he suffered an injury because he tried to, I guess he was so confident that he ended up pulling a muscle and he had to do therapy.
Hey, get back up on that
So
horse,
yeah.
you know, because there he will get the resilience, the discipline, and he'll also get some, you know, to interact in more masculine energy, you know, especially if it's something like karate,
Yes, yeah.
taekwondo, or something like
Right.
that, you know, and then to get that energy
Right,
out.
yeah.
That's the other thing, especially with boys. They need to
Right.
be able to get out
Yeah, I take it all
and
the time.
do all kinds of crazy stuff,
Exactly, Dr.
you
Michelle.
know. So,
Mm-hmm.
as I
See,
said,
the thing is, yeah, the thing
you
is right now with the I really don't like homeschooling. It's okay, but
know,
I really would prefer if he could have, you know, done something else. But you know how it is here in New York. They're trying to put restrictions on your kids going to school.
yeah, and that's what I'm
And I'm trying to find a good
aware of.
co-op. Yeah, that's what makes it difficult.
Go down that pathway, like you had asked about SSI and whatever. If you go down that pathway of having them label your child, then you're in that
Mm-hmm.
track. And a lot of times they will push that because
Yeah.
that's how they make money. Not only on the medications, but that's how
Yeah.
the Board of Education makes a lot of money, because as soon as that label gets stuck onto your child, they make twice as much money in the classroom. So you want to
Yeah.
keep
Exactly.
that in the
Yep,
back
it's
of your
true.
head. Why are they so excited about me doing whatever? And it's because they want that label.
Right.
That label is what they need to be able to go to school.
Yeah.
And you may or may not want
Excuse
to
me.
be stuck on your child for the rest of his life. So
Exactly.
something to consider. But
Thank
in any
you.
case, my
Thank you,
ladies
Docs.
and gents, we are so grateful that you were able to join us today. And Dr. Ali, Dr.
Thanks for
Lewis,
listening.
is there something that you would like to leave us with for this month?
Well, I just want to say, according to what Carla was saying, but it's for everyone, never let a diagnose shake on your intuition and your belief system.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ali.
Amen. Amen. Let's just love on these childs. That's the best medicine.
Exactly, Dr. Lewis, I am.
And be courageous to allow your child to be different,
Thank you.
you know. Well, thank you everyone once again for joining us on this month's episode of The Doctors Are In. And remember, we are here every third Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can feel free to send in a question, send in a comment, like this episode, and put on the notification bell so that you will be notified of upcoming episodes. And be sure to register so that you'll be able to be included in upcoming episodes of The Doctors Are In. Until next time, peace and blessings.
Thank you, Docs. Take care, Karen.
Thank you.
And your beautiful
Bye
self.
bye, gracias.
Bye. Adios.
All right, everybody.